Tonight we have, I'm going to give you announcements for the coming programs first, and then I'll introduce our guests tonight. We have, next month, we will be meeting on the last Monday of April, which I don't know what the date is, but it's the last Monday. And we're actually going to meet in the hall. We'll have our young students from the University of Delaware.
27th.
Thank you.
27th.
27th of April. Karina from the coal mining town, and Fabian from the Baden, from the area near the French border in southern Germany. So they're going to come and tell us about their regions and what we can expect to see in that geographical part of Germany. They are charming young people, and you will enjoy them, so I hope you will come out and support them.
Also at 7 p.m.?
7:30.
7:30, okay.
7:30. And then the last Monday, or the last meeting this season, will be in May. It will be the week before May, and I'll let you find the calendar date for me. I think it's the third Monday. We will, and the ladies always meet that same date, so we will be upstairs in the boardroom, and we have a guest speaker, Joyce Bischoff, who is teaching genealogy at the Academy of Lifelong Learning, or Osher Institute of Lifelong Learning now, and she is going to talk about creating a genealogy will, which I think is a brilliant idea, and we should get some really interesting ideas of how to prepare our materials so that they don't get lost.
That's the third Monday of May.
Of May.
It will be the 18th.
18th of May. That will be the 18th of May. And then in the summer, we will have one meeting where everybody can come and give us ideas for programs for next year. We like to get a good start and have most of the year planned by the end of July. Tonight, because of the weather that we had, and I'm glad because I think there would be fewer people that would have come out on that potentially icy night back in February, Erika Ambrosch is going to be telling us her story. We have heard from her husband, Heinz. We have heard from her daughter, Jeanette. And tonight we will be hearing from Erika, and I'm going to turn it over to you right now here. Okay?
My name is Erika Ambrosch, and this is my story.
Erika, I apologize, my fault. Excuse me. We're recording tonight, so since we're recording, don't have any little side conversations, don't scrape your chair around, don't rattle your papers.
Turn off cell phones.
Turn off cell phones, you know, all that stuff to keep it quiet so we actually get to hear Erika, who's going to speak loud. Okay.
Okay. I was born in January 47 in Rotheim, a small village in Hessen, 30 kilometers north of Frankfurt. My family came because of the ethnic cleansing after the war from Moldavia, what is a part of Sudetenland and today Czech Republic. My grandmother and mother came from a big farm. They had to leave with only 50 pounds per person in 45. They were ordered to a Czech farm where they had to work from the morning to the evening. They did not get any money, they worked just for food. On this farm, my mother met my Czech father. They fell in love and I was the result. Then, when my mother and my grandmother were transported by a cattle wagon to West Germany, my mother was pregnant. But my father couldn't go with them because he was a Czech. I saw my father the first and the last time in '69. I was raised in a Catholic family. I have one brother and one sister. They are younger than I am. My grandmother was living always with us. She had raised us because my mother had to work. In '53 I had to go to school for 8 years. In '61 I apprenticed as a beautician for 3 years. In '65, I married my husband Heinz, and the same year my daughter Jeanette was born. In '73, I made my master degree as a beautician, and when I had my master title, I opened my own business in '74. In '90, we sold our house and my business and moved to Delaware, because our daughter Jeanette was living here already for 4 years. And she is the reason why we are here. I took a job as a part-time position at Macy's as a beautician till they closed the beauty shop. Since then I go to a few people and do their hair. In '94 our wonderful grandson was born, and we are very happy we are here. That's all what I have to say.
So where were you in Western Germany?
In Hessen. In Hessen, here, it's too small.
It is too small. Sorry.
North of 30 kilometers from Frankfurt, north. Town.
What kind of schooling did you have?
I went just to normal school, and then I had apprenticeship for 3 years.
For some of us who weren't born and raised in Germany, what's a normal school?
This is a normal school.
Is that 1 to 8th grade or 8th grade
It's the
to?
8th grade, yeah. And then you can go in the higher schools, like a high school.
Okay,
But when you want a musician, you have to go to a beauty school.
Vocational school, in other words. Vocational schools.
No, higher level school,
Vocational schools.
middle school or gymnasium.
It's like a trade school.
Yes, I was grade school.
Kent, all right, Tom, sorry.
I couldn't hear very well. Did you say you were born in '47, so
In
your parents
They
Came
came from the Czech
Essen.
Republic, yeah,
from where?
from Moravia, from Sudetenland,
45.
45, yeah.
46.
or 46.
So how did you meet Heinz?
Actually, my friend, she had a boyfriend, and the boyfriend had a friend, and it was Heinz. And so we came together.
Erika, did you have any training here in the beauty school? And is there a difference?
No.
Then you don't know
I
how
got
they...
just my license
Yeah.
license to work.
I was just wondering about the difference in how they do hair in Germany.
Big difference.
It is
Here
a
you
big
go
difference.
for 9 months to school, and after 9 months you're a hairdresser. This is not possible.
So your training was how many years?
3
years.
And after 5 years, when you have your Gesellenbrief, then you can do the master degree after 5 years.
How long was your family in the Sudetenland before they had to leave?
Forever.
Forever. My mother is born there, my grandmother was born there, and after the war they had to go.
I had another family that I knew that 500 years they'd been in Czechoslovakia, and then they had to leave.
Yeah.
Left the Gutenberg Bible there.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you so much, Erika. Our second speaker this evening is Reverend Johnson. He was at Zion Lutheran for, 15 years, something?
50 years, no.
No, not 15.
20 years.
20 years. I knew it had been for a good while.
A good while.
And just retired last year, and apparently immediately left the state and did a long trip.
Get out of town.
Yeah, so well, welcome back and come and tell us about Zion.
Oh. There's two things I wanted to do. One I can talk about Zion because you know there's a real history there. But the other thing, I thought you were a genealogical group also. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. So I have some good notes on the records that are at Zion. The first three of the 5 registers. So I wanted to go through those. So if I shorten up Zion's side, because I want to get you to the genealogy side, and you'll find I want to teach you about what's there, and you can also use those. You can go there and use them in the church. You can't take them out, of course, and you can't put them on a copier, but of course we take pictures these days with our cameras. So you can take a lot of things. People are tracing their genealogy, their whole families through Zion, because 1848 is the first register, and you can carry it on all the way through. Then there's Woody Yeager. He was baptized in that font, the first baby baptized in a very special font. There's a lot of history here, and Woody has known you for years, and I can't believe you're sitting right there next to me. And Trudy, of course, she'll be able to straighten out any of my mistakes, right? because she wrote the book. There's about 30 of these books left of Zion, sitting in the safe, and sitting on the floor in a box. And if you really want a really good history of Zion, it's right in here. And they were selling these when our 150th anniversary for about $40. I don't even know if they have a price on them anymore, but I don't know. But there's just a few of them left. If you're interested in the story of Zion, if you have family, how many has family that are around Wilmington for quite a long time? All right, so you could probably find your family in there and find people you don't even know are in your family. Anyways, who your father really? No, I'm just kidding. Every Lutheran church in Delaware wants to claim it is a descendant of Old Swedes Church. It's not true. If you look at, especially in Wilmington, there's 3 churches in Wilmington, of course. There's Zion Lutheran Church, and that's the German church, and then there's St. Stephen's Lutheran Church, and that's the English church. And then there's Holy Trinity. Used to be Holy Trinity, now is Spirit of Life Lutheran Church. And all 3 of them have roots, and they all have funny little roots. They try to claim Old Swedes Church, but they really can't. But they do anyways. They do anyways. So you'll see in all the churches. Zion has in their history, they'll talk about Old Swedes Church. And then St. Stephen's, when you look at all their pastors and all their churches, Old Swedes Church will be in there. And then Holy Trinity has the Torculus Tower, Raeoris Torculus Tower. That's the first Swedish pastor. All right, first Swedish pastor in Wilmington. He was brought in maybe on the second ship. I thought it was the first ship, but the second round came in about 3 or 4 years later, and he's buried there because he never made it back. Right? He's underneath the church there someplace in the grounds. So not the last of the pastors to be buried there. But they were all Swedes, all right? My people. All right? I'm Gregory Johnson, but I'm a Finn Swede. You ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Finn Swede. Well, that means that the Finns were dominated by the Swedes for centuries, all right? They were kind of passed back and forth. We were kind of these strange little people out in the woods, all right? And Laplanders and stuff like up in the cold area. And that's why I fish, by the way. But my family's name is Enfors. When my grandfather left, he was fleeing the Russians. That's why I had to ask you about fleeing the Russians. Fleeing the Russians. He was fleeing the Russians when he was 17, about 1898. And that's a whole other history, but he left because he knew if he stayed around, he was going to be in the Russian army. You know, they were dominated by Russia at the time, so he was going to go there and be put in the front line of the Tsar's army. And all the kids then knew that they were going to be in the front. When the battle started. So it was he left to come here and ended up in upstate Michigan. And his name is N4s, but the Swedes in genealogy, you ever done a Swedish genealogy? Anybody here? It's like impossible, right? Because the family name changes every generation. Every generation. That's why John's son is son of John. All right? So my dad's name was Robert, so I'm Robert's son. My son's name is Gregory's son. His son's name is Robert's son. Because it's the dad's name. And you put a son or a daughter on it changes. And the son and the daughter have different ones too, because John's son, John's daughter. So it changes all. It's horrible. Absolutely. Genealogy is a nightmare over there. Nightmare. Unless you get to the church, and then you got every generation, you got to change it. So when he got here to Ellis Island, the story goes in the family that he decided to go the Swedish way and changed his name from N4s to his father's name was Johann. You know, so he's Johnson. That's how he got it. Beyond that, I don't understand. They went immediately up into the country and stopped speaking Swedish. My dad and his brother and sister never learned Swedish. You know, they were here and they were going to be English or Americans. So they didn't learn anything. You know, a couple of prayers, you know what I mean, but none of that. So we were ripped out of the old country and going back to Zion. 1848, about 50 years after there had been a Lutheran church in Delaware. The Old Swedes was a Lutheran church. Old Swedes was a Lutheran church. Old Swedes was a Lutheran church. So when they came over here in 1638 and landed and had their first celebration of thankfulness for kissing the ground, it was done with Lutheran service. And Rayoris Torquilus was the first pastor, and they worked within the little fort there, which is down where the rocks are, you know, and that was a Lutheran church, and for 150 years, they were Lutherans. When people come to the United States, it goes through first generation, you're holding on for dear life for your culture. Second generation, you teach your children at least German. Third generation, they're Americans. All right, they're Americans. And my family did that very quick. You know, they decided they were going to do that, and they did. So the German also, the Swedish history in Old Swedes Church, the Lutheran, once they became Americans here, then as much as they tried to stay together, there was this whole mess of English people. Where were the Germans? They were here too, you know. Where were they? Pennsylvania. In
Lancaster.
Germantown. Germantown. Because what happened was they came over, and of course Penn's sons, you know, that owned all the land, had promised them that they were going to get a nice place along one of these rivers, like where everybody wanted to be along the river so you could get in and out of town. Germantown is totally landlocked. Right? Totally landlocked. There's no way you can get out by water. And if you want to travel in colonial times, you travel by water. Roads are no good, you know, unless you walk. Even that's bad. Roads, and the Swedes went by. So what you did, they told them they were going to have this nice piece of land. They put them in Germantown. Why? Because the Native Americans are out there.
How did they get along with the Native Americans?
Well, you know, the Swedes actually, apparently, the Swedes did pretty well. The Germans, that's another story. Yeah, but the Swedes had some things going for them. One of the things was the Swedes were a very small minority when they were here, so, you know, you don't mess with the majority. That's crazy. So you get along, right? You get along. And they also did some strange things. They had a same kind of agriculture. It's called slash and burn, right? Where you burn down the forest and then you plant your crops. Every year you burn down whatever there, and that fertilized the soil. The Indians did that, Native Americans did that, and so did the Swedes. Same kind of agriculture. They also had what was called a sauna.
Oh, yeah.
Native Americans also had a sauna, all right? Sweat houses,
Hot rocks.
yeah. So they had some interesting things that they did. And also the Swedes began to raise tobacco from the Native Americans and all kinds of things. So the Swedes that were here, the things that they left with us is the log cabin is Swedish, no question about it. Came from the Finns and the Swedes, brought the log cabin over here. If you go up to Jamestown or you go out to Plymouth Colony, you see the reconstructions, that twaddle and mud stuff that they made. First rain comes and they're gone. Right? You get it yourself in a good log cabin, you're going to be warm for the rest of the winter. But so they did that, and so the Native Americans, they got along pretty well actually, but it was minority business, you know. And then the Swedes got taken over by the Dutch, and the Dutch got taken over by the English. There was a battle, you know, in the fort. The Swedes were hanging out in the fort, you know, with their muskets or whatever, and the Dutch came out there with their ships, and they said, we give up. And they gave up and said, if we can go back to our farms, you know, we don't care. We'll be with you people. So that's what they did. They just switched you know, their allegiance and went back to their farms and continued. So, anyways, to get to Zion, 1848. There had not been an official Lutheran church since 1798, which is when the last Lutheran church became Swedish, became Episcopalian, Anglican. Why? Because they all spoke English, right? And they all were intermarried, and the Swedes were a minority colony, so you had maybe at the highest point, you know, officially minority, maybe 7,000 Swedes, 7,000. Already by that time, the Germans were 60,000. In 1640, they almost had a chance. I mean, not 1740, they almost had a chance. They got together with the Germans. They were going to talk about remaining Lutheran. And what happened? Well, they found out, number one, Swedes had all the best land because they'd been here longer. Swedes knew how to get along with the English, who were in charge. Swedes were intermarried with the English, right? And the Swedes couldn't speak German. So why would we want to join them? And actually, when Muhlenberg and all them came over, and the first person that was ordained on this side of the pond, this side of the ocean, was ordained by the Swedish Lutherans for the Germans. So it's a whole big story about that. 1848.
Irish play any part in this?
Not now. No. We had all the beer. 1848. The down on the east side, which that's all it was just the east side at that point of Wilmington. Some Germans got together. About 37 of it, according to the book, 37 of them got together. And the first thing they did was what? What do Germans do?
Drink.
No. They start arguing, and they split. Within a couple of months, they forget it, you know, right? That's true. True story. 37 of them got together, started to make a church, and started arguing or something, and it disbanded within months, right? And then a couple of years later, Pastor Waltz came along, and he was brought in. He was heading for the Netherlands of America, and then a doctor named Mann decided, why don't you go down there and work with these Germans, Germans a little bit down there in Wilmington and see if you can get them organized. And he got it done. And of the 37 that had tried to start a church, an unauthorized church, that was, did you read that? Unauthorized? Yeah, unauthorized. A church, they disbanded, but 22 of them started Zion Lutheran Church. And then it started. And then one pastor, another pastor, another pastor, another pastor. Why? Always in debt. You know Germans and money? You read the history, it's like, or always in debt, right? So it scares them to death that, hey, you know, I have $2 in debt, you know, and so they were fighting about that, and they were fighting about other things, and there's a wonderful story in there that the pastor was preaching politics. This doesn't change. And the pastor was getting paid too much.
That's why they were in debt.
Well, that's what the guy said. Apparently, there's a wonderful story in the book. You got to read that they actually wrote it down. The pastor that wrote the first 50 years history, he said that there's in every congregation there's a nitpicker or a Judas, and he said, yeah, he's the one that was complaining about the pastor getting paid too much money, but you can see from the monetary rolls that he never gave a dime. Argue about somebody else's money. All right? So anyway, but life goes on. I guess those are all powerful stories. What happened was they had a few pastors, ding, 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 ding. Every 3 years they seemed to be changing as they went through. But they were starting to grow, and they got themselves a little piece of property. They built the first little one level kind of church, and continued to grow. And along came Pastor Eisenschmied. And Eisenschmied was there for 43 years. He's the longest serving pastor of Zion. Guess who's number 2? Number 2.
How many did, what's his name?
Bayshore? 19. But anyways, that's because we were both very, no, anyway, but he got in there, and apparently, a wonderful, wonderful pastor, all right? A brilliant man, because he also was a doctor, MD. He was an MD. Now, this is smart Germans, right? Guess who got all the free medical? Pastor visits your home. By the way, Pastor, is there anything I can do about, can you visit me next Tuesday? I'm working on, I mean, who knows, but he was there for 43 years. They built the place up. From 1848 to 1898, 50 years of history, and they continued to grow and grow and grow. The boats kept coming across the ocean, one after another. There were some hard times during the Civil War. Civil War times were very difficult. It says in there they were in debt, and they sent out a letter. To a man who would serve them, who was in another parish. Could you send us some money? Take up an offering for your old church back home? Never got a reply.
What was the difficulty during the Civil War?
What?
What was,
Well,
in detail?
The Civil War was a mess.
Oh,
The whole country.
I'll quote you anything. Andy and I have been to all the battlefields.
Yeah.
I'm asking what the difficulty was with the church.
Well, the church was probably just the total problem with the world. Men are out on the battlefield. People are dying by the thousands. It was a horrible time. Horrible time. And endless battle right here. First Delaware, second Delaware, third Delaware.
Yeah, Lincoln put all the lawmakers in Maryland in jail so they didn't secede.
Yeah, they had all that going on too, yeah. And, then you had the southern Delaware with all its interesting plantations, and northern Delaware with all their abolitionists.
Yep.
We had the railroad up here, and they had the plantations down there. But it was a difficult time. But Pastor Eisenschmied was a wonderful pastor. He only served 2 parishes, one shortly, and then he went to Zion, and he just stayed there and built the place up. By 1898, they built the big church at 6th and Jackson. Wonderful story. The Stokel Brewery. You know the Stokel Brewery? Germans are good at it. You know the Stokel Brewery? The Stokel Brewery. In town here, there was a number of breweries. But Stokel Brewery, Stoekel, was there on 6th and Jackson, in that area. Right.
5th and Adams. 4th and Jackson.
4th and Jackson, okay. 4th and Jackson. Yeah, he probably was living there. 4th and Jackson.
It was on 5th and Adams.
5th
and Adams.
It was a block from where the church is now. Was then. Okay. So, but old man Stokel decided to give some property to the church to move it out of a converted Sunday, no, they converted a schoolhouse. The three-story schoolhouse down on French Street is where it was. And around the corner was where the German Hall was. You know the German Hall? You're sitting in it.
The Zagerbund,
The Zagerbund.
downtown Wilmington?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
they call it German Hall, right?
That was 1800, well, 1800.
The Germans started about, the Zagerbund started about
1853.
53, so 5 years after the club started. They needed a social outlet. Let's call it beer drinking.
Yeah.
And then you have 3 or 4 beers and then you start singing. And then you start competing with everybody else that's singing, you know, they have a wonderful club and everybody's singing, you know. But you couldn't do it in the church, you couldn't drink in the church. You know, it wasn't allowed, so you went down the block in downtown and you had the German Hall. And
And that was on French Street?
it was somewhere down there close by, yeah. The old Zion was on French Street, I think, Trudy. The one that was the converted schoolhouse.
Right, that was there, but East Sixth Street is where the club
Yeah.
ultimately was
Sixth
built.
Street.
But,
Yeah.
but they started before that,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
just in a little,
But it was the same
Bar.
people.
in the
Remember,
bar.
the organist was the one who was playing the music for the singing club.
So we are talking about 1860s.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yeah, 1860s, 70s, you know, like that, it was coming through. So, but 1898 was when they decided they were getting so big, you need a new place, and they got a place up on the hill on the west side. Big argument about, you know, old man Stoker gave them land. They had land, free land. If they put church on between 4th and 5th, 6th and 5th and 6th,
Fifth and sixth.
someplace, 5th and 6th, he gave them a piece of land, and they decided that's a wonderful thing. So they started arguing. Wonder of wonders. Why? We don't want to give up our old church. Nobody wants to leave their pew. My mother sat in that pew, you know, and they didn't want to do that. And then, you know, it's so hard for us to get from the east side up to Jackson Street. That's on the west side of town. Beyond that is farms, right? There's 6th Street, and Jackson was the end of the city almost, right? We don't want to have to go all the way up that hill every Sunday morning. And you walked in those days, you know. There wasn't any trolleys or anything. You walked up there. You couldn't afford the trolley. You walked up there, so they started arguing, and decided not to. 5, 6, 7, 5 years later, after old man Stokel dies, his wife makes a deal to give them a piece of land at 6th and Jackson, which is just 1 block from the free land. Apparently now it's not too far west. So she buys the land, you know, and in her husband's name gives it to the church, and that's where the new big church was built, which is that one there, but you'll see. So they built that one there, and that was at the Jubilee year, you know, 1898. So 50 years Zion had been there. Jubilee year, and the church was going great guns. The pastor had been there about 30 years at that time, and boats kept coming from Germany, you know, just kept coming. And people were coming in town, and it was just wonderful, wonderful time for Lutheranism. And and everybody they were preaching in German, and Sunday school was in German, and confirmation was in German, and services were in German, everything was in German. So there wasn't any problem. Until
War?
about 1912.
All right, first of all,
The younger people started leaving the church. It's written in here. Started leaving the church because they couldn't do the German or didn't want to do the German, and they were going to other churches. And the Sunday school started getting smaller. So they had to figure out what we're going to do with these renegade children of ours. And they finally gave in and started doing Sunday school in English, along with starting an English service at night. Right? So you had English services at night, and just a couple times a year, or once a month, something like that. It was very little bit, you know, but that brought so the younger people started coming back in, and they were happy about that, and everything, and then within a very short time, by the 1920s, you know, they decided it's pretty much the main thing now is English. You have to go with the English.
Oh, they kept the German and English for a while.
For a while,
Oh.
yeah. The first pastor that was totally English, Pastor Newmeyer, and that was 47? About 47, yeah. He was here 13 years. 42, something like that.
Outstanding pastor.
Yeah. But before that, they were all good auf Deutsch, you know, sermons and all that. But the
They're
children
adults.
and the young people had changed, you know, had wanted English and couldn't do the German. And that's the same thing happened to the Swedes, you know, back in the day. Happened to the Italians, happened to the Irish. It's not a new story. It's just what happens. So I've done a whole kind of little personal study and found out that 100 years is the break point. After 100 years, if all things go normally, your great-grandchildren, your grandchildren, great-grandchildren are no longer, they're Americans. That's what you become. It's a culture of its own. Culture of its own. And actually, we're all Americans. Right? We're all Americans. So that's where we live. So we take our German culture, our Finnish culture, our Swedish culture, and we enjoy the variety, you know, and the good beer, and the music, you know, the dancing, or whatever, you know, it becomes a cultural thing. But, you know, when you go off to school, you know, it's something you study. You don't live it. You don't live it. So that's just the normal process. About 100, 150 years, people become Americans. And then you're set with all that. During the war, like you said, the First World War was a big, big problem. And in 1914, this is, I don't know if you wrote this, no, Catherine Croft. After much discussion, English was adopted as in our Sunday school. At first, the German school was held at 9 a.m. and the English at 2 p.m. All right? This lasted 3 or 4 years until finally everything was done in English, just as it had previously been done in German. So 1914, 3 or 4 years is the middle of what? The war. When I was younger, if you went into a Lutheran church and you saw an American flag in there, you ever see a church with a Lutheran church with American flags? Yeah. That came in World War I. That we Lutherans put a flag in there to let people know that, you know, we're Americans. You know, we're Americans. Our sons are over there fighting too. You know, this is our allegiance. This is who we are. We're Americans. And you'd have your American flag in there. And during my time in the ministry, they started taking them out all over the place because it was no longer a question, I guess. And it said, just as everything had been done, this was due partly because of the hatred toward anything German caused by the war. As conditions in the outside world changed, the Sunday school had to fall in line. Pastor von Bose still conducted a German school on Saturday mornings. And a men and women's Bible class was started in 1921, and yet there were still no English Bibles in the church, although church was the acceptable language. So it was, yeah, World War I really gave it a kick toward English, and then World War II and all that. So that whole history is interesting, particularly now, because what happened in the 50s was there were three Lutheran churches in the 40s and 50s in Delaware. And then they started putting the Lutheran churches in the suburbs.
You want to give a plug for the book while I got the camera running?
What's that?
A plug for the book, where it can be bought or where it can be gotten?
Right at Zion. That's the only place you can get for Zion. At Zion's safe.
Put down so now say it again.
Zion, the 150th anniversary edition
Okay.
done by Trudy Gilganest
Oh,
No, not all by me. There
and
were
Betty
others
Blocker.
that
You're the only one here.
And the props.
And the crop. It's a wonderful. They have pictures and they have clippings and all kinds of stuff in here, and they reproduce the old histories that were done by the pastors and lay leaders. So, but during the 50s and that we started putting churches, Lutheran churches, out in the suburbs, and that just took the people out of the city to the suburbs, and the church has been on a normal city decline, ever since. All right. So the question now for Zion is whether they can reinstitute themselves as the neighborhood. There's one point in here when they were talking about whether they were going to go up on up on Lancaster Avenue. That was a big problem. You know what happened to the church, right? 6th and Jackson. Yeah, but what happened? Why was it vacant? I-95, right? They sold it, and a month later it burned. This pastor got in there with a match. We're not going back. I don't know. But anyways, so they had to decide whether they're going to stay in the city or go out. At that time, they did a census of their 900 members. 900 members, 400 of them lived in the city. 400 lived. And that's including Ellesmere. I think now, if you were going to count them living in the city, I'll bet you there's 8 or 10. The rest of them are in the suburbs. Coming in. It's a beautiful place to come to, but, you've got all these other churches out there. So that caused a big problem. So the question for Zion's future in the next 30 years is whether they can, there's lots of people that need the gospel of Jesus Christ right there, right next door, a whole bunch of them. But they're not going to be Germans off the boat. They're going to be Spanish, and they're going to be African American, and they're going to be people that just don't go to church anymore, like my kids. There's going to be neighborhood people have to rebuild itself as a neighborhood church where people can walk in, and there's plenty of field to do that. So that's their future, and if they get a good leader and some real inspiration, and God willing, it's all about God, then they will reinstitute themselves like they did with English and like they did with after there's a couple times, when they were just, oh, we're going to die, you read the story, we're going to die, we can't afford it. They don't die. Germans don't die. They find a way. They just complain while they're finding the way, but they find a way.
we're arguing.
You're arguing about it. Let's argue about it, so. But tighten in. So Zion's history is one of the oldest Lutheran church in Delaware, extant Lutheran church, because all the other ones that were around Old Swedes was the other Lutheran church in Delaware. It became Episcopalian. And the story of that is that during the Revolution, the King of Sweden, who had been sending missionaries over to keep that church going, took his missionaries back because the Americans were anti-kings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? They were Democrats. So it was costing him too much money. He brought them all back, and the Swedes looked around and said, well, who are we going to join now? We joined the Germans, well, we can't speak German. There's too many of them, they'll outvote us. They were really worried they were going to lose their property. American vote, at 60,000, 7,000, who's going to win the vote? It all become German in about a week. And they did have the best land in the valley, no question about it. It wasn't too long ago that Old Swede Church had to relook at all the property in the city of Wilmington to get it cleared out, because there was land titles that were not cleared, and they could have picked them up, like maybe the DuPont building.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's a great history. It's a history of a church that grew and has been in 4 different homes in Wilmington. never left the city, 4 different homes in Wilmington, and continued to serve the city. Had a lot of work with the African American community down at Hilltop Lutheran Neighborhood Center, which is there on 8th Street and not Jackson, but the
Van
next one.
Buren?
Lincoln, yeah. So they had a lot of work on that, so, but right now, you know, the Zion Church is largely Caucasian, largely, I mean, super largely. So it's gone completely back. So that doesn't put them in a very good position. The neighborhood, as we studied, is 1/3 African American, 1/3 Caucasian, and 1/3 Hispanic. So what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? And we have a lot of outreach with our camps and stuff like that, scouting and lots of different, but the church itself, you know, as a worshiping community is not reflected in the neighborhood. And most of them live in the suburbs. You know, so that doesn't help either. But it's a normal story for a church. Now, I'm going to give you these because I spent time doing this.